Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Stratford Festival viewing party for our 2014 production of King John, directed by Tim Carroll. My name is Antoni Cimolino. I'm the Artistic Director of the Stratford Festival, and with me today are two of Canada's finest actors. Tom McCamus, who plays the part of King John, and Graham Abbey, who plays the part of the Bastard. And we're lucky that they're here. Are you guys here?
Yes, we're here. Sort of.
Digitally, at least.
I thought, where are they? It's nice to see you guys. Are you both well in this crazy time?
Yeah, no, doing all right. I live on a farm, a 50-acre farm, so it's not a bad place to be during this kind of time. So.
And I'm in Stratford. Yes, I'm doing okay. I feel like continuing like my grandfather trying to adjust the clock on the VCR in terms of adjusting to the digital world, but I'm getting there.
Well, I'm looking forward to tonight. I'm looking forward to it because this play is a rare gem. It's not produced very often, and to have such a quality production as this one captured and your work is exciting. Just to say a few things about it as we begin. This is an early play of Shakespeare's, and it's about a king with a clouded claim to the throne who is busy trying to get rid of or sideline his rivals. And when we think of King John, normally, guys, what do we think of? Magna Carta, right? When the nobles forced the king to sign over certain rights, which led to democracy. And then we think of Robin Hood and our friend Brian Bedford, who played him in the cartoon. Tell me a little bit about the story of King John, because it actually doesn't cover those two things, does it?
No, it doesn't. Graham, you're probably better at.
You're going to lead us off with the Magna Carta. That's a bold move. Tom, you've been in it twice. Well, I mean, it was not a precursor in terms of time that Shakespeare wrote it, but it was one of the earliest of these history plays, telling an early period of history. But really, it's a meditation and a comment, I think, on inheritance and legitimacy and all of those things. That it's sort of set in a political context, but it has a real human element to it. I mean, it tells the story of, a guy named Philip the Bastard. It tells the story of the reign of King John, which of course was fraught with questions about inheritance and legitimacy in terms of his strength on the throne and how the moves he takes to sort of solidify that. And a guy named Philip the Bastard who's sort of plucked out of the dirty masses, so to speak, to be a part of this upper echelon of English elites. And he sort of learns his way. He learns how politics work. Unlike Shakespeare's other history plays, which certainly deal with movements of the monarchy and the nobles, this one has a bit more of a broader comment on how people operate in political spheres and their relationship to the English public.
Hearing you talk about it, Graham, I'm surprised it's not called The Bastard. But in fact, and we'll get to this later, The Bastard has 20% of the lines in the play, whereas King John only has 17.
I kept telling Tom this all through rehearsals.
Well, listen, for the viewers, let me just go through the plot really simply. So you'll all remember, you think about King John, you think about Richard the Lionhearted, his eldest brother, and Eleanor of Aquitaine, his mother. And so in this story, you've got Richard's gone, the eldest brother's gone, the second brother, Geoffrey, is gone, but his wife, Constance, still has their son, Arthur, who, as the son of the second son, would, in primogeniture, probably have a good claim to the throne, if not have the claim to the throne. But in a lot of Shakespeare's plays, evil uncles take away the crown from nephews. And in this case, that uncle is King John, who, as the third son, has a claim to the throne. I think Richard said he should be the king, but he's having to defend that as the play starts. And it's being contested by France and Austria and the Pope. And so this play was first produced during Henry VIII's reign, not Shakespeare's version, a previous version. So it began the anti-continentalism of the British, which has recently ended in Brexit. So this is where it all came from, really. Mm-hmm. So Tommy, tell us about, what was King John to you? What kind of man is he?
It's always been, he's kind of like a mama's boy. That's a very, I've done this twice, once with you, Antoni, directing it, and when I played Hubert, and then this time with Tim directing it. Yeah, that's part of it, was that he's sort of governed by his mother, or he's looking for his mother's support. When Tim and I started talking about this character, Tim had been fascinated by, I had shown him actually the interview with Colonel Williams from Trenton, who had been charged with murder. And there's an interview with him of him actually being kind of caught out in it. It's pretty fascinating. It goes on for a long time. So Tim got quite fascinated by that kind of character because it was really, he was sociopathic. Like there was no kind of emotion in there. There was like devoid of empathy. So we decided to just play with John as if he had that kind of temperament. So we started to just take scenes, particularly the one with Hubert, where he's trying to convince Hubert to kill the boy. And it was fascinating to see what happened when we applied that surface to it. So we put it through the entire play. So that's kind of what we came up with, as he actually had being slightly sociopathic. And it was a pretty fascinating, it made a lot of sense of why he could do what he's going to do. And that was kind of how we went at him.
Well, sorry. So leaders who are sociopathic and have no empathy. I mean, God, that should never happen.
No, it shouldn't. No.
Tell us about the bastard, Graham. In the first scene of the play, he shows up, and this amazing story unfolds of the son of a landowner, and his brother comes in and says, he's actually not my brother. He's not my father's son. And ergo the bastard part, but then it's confirmed by your mother, and you find a new family. You find out that your dad was actually Richard the Lionhearted. So tell us a bit about that journey, which begins with such a bang.
Yeah, I mean, he's a real special character in the canon. I think Harold Bloom said he's probably Shakespeare's first real character. He described it a Falstaffian type of person that's able to sort of pierce that fourth wall and speak to the audience. And as all bastards in the canon, like all bastards in the canon, he's an outsider. But in this case, he sort of finds his way inside and becomes heroic, so to speak, according to some people. So he comes in with this land dispute, and he finds out he has royal blood and he's knighted, and Eleanor takes a liking to him, and he finds an affinity, certainly to her as a character. They have quite a body exchange, and she likes his bravado. And so he finds his way inside these back rooms of Parliament, so to speak. And the amazing thing about playing the bastard, I think, is that ability to connect to an audience. Of course, Tim was, one of the directors who really opened up my world as an actor to that ability to really have a two-way exchange with an audience, that you can actually truly ask those questions. And I mean, we went so far as you recall in this production to me putting a severed head in somebody's lap. But, that sense of play with the audience, the bastard sits on this really interesting line. He is comic relief in a lot of the play, but he also, in the back half of the play, takes on this huge, heroic, quite serious, epic journey, culminating in him speaking at the end about England and the strength of the nation and all of that. So it's an extraordinary ride to play that guy. I think unlike any I've done in the canon, because he really bridges both sides in an amazing way.
You're right. I mean, it begins with a lot of laughter. What I find amazing, one of the things amazing about this play is that ideas and words are floated at the beginning like currencies, like honor, legitimacy, and everybody's laughing at things like honor. And then, as you were saying, Graham, the play gets darker. And as they start trying to put out the eyes of children, we begin to understand what a little bit of honor in this world might mean. The legitimacy, let's go back to that and something you said, Tom, about Mama's Boy. So at first, we're introduced to the idea of marital infidelity and legitimacy with the bastard. But then before long, Eleanor's accusing Constance to say that Arthur himself is a bastard, and Constance comes right back at Eleanor. So talk to us a bit about why that preoccupation in this play with power, legitimacy, and the idea of infidelity.
There certainly is a thing about sons and bonding and sons. I mean, interesting thing about the bastard, like I found, maybe it had to do with our production, but John has his own son, who we see more at the end of the play than we do anywhere through it. However, the relationship between John and the bastard seems to be almost like a father-son kind of relationship. So he really depends on him, and that's where if he has any emotion for anybody, he seems to be giving it to the bastard as opposed to anybody else in his whole family. Don't quite know what that means, but it was a great thing to play. I do. Yeah, no, nothing. I won't say anything.
Yeah, no, but as you were saying, Mama's Boy, like the king and queen come on stage right at the beginning, but it's not your wife, it's your mother. Right. And her death also plays in. It sort of anticipates the death of Lady M. And he seems to feel that too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does actually. Yeah, he sort of, as I seem to recall, he feels it quite deeply. Whether he actually feels it that deeply or he uses that thing in order to get sympathy from somebody else, I don't know. Whether he sort of feels it in not a normal way. It's quite extreme, actually. So.
And the other notion of legitimacy, Graham, is like, in Shakespeare's plays, the person who's king never really is the real king. There's always somebody in the play who'd be a better king. And in this case, it's the bastard. It feels like he's inherited, although Richard the Lionhearted isn't in the play, you get the sense that, in a way, the bastard is Richard the Lionhearted.
Yeah, I mean, in a larger sense, I suppose people have commented on this play as questioning that larger sense of inheritance, both in a patriarchal sense. I mean, there's two very strong women in this play that raise questions about, that lineage and whether it should be purely patriarchal, and also in terms of nobility and a commoner, and so it really has a lot to do with human will and the rules of the game, I mean, and that's on a larger sense with John's place on the throne, but it goes into microcosms inside this play about how legitimate are people, and should we stay entrenched in the rules we've always had, or can we reinvent the people that are legitimized, I guess.
Yeah, and you become legitimate through your actions. Like, in other words, he seems to have the power, the integrity that John doesn't have.
Yeah.
The other thing that's brought up in the play is commodity, the idea of money and changing political sides. It feels like all honor, everything goes out the window, doesn't it, when money comes up in marriage? So, Tommy, as the play goes on, John makes agreements with the powers and then flips them on its head, doesn't he? He's anti-clerical and then anti-pope, and then he allows the pope to crown him.
Yeah, he's a very clever man in terms of the way he deals with things, and he will use whatever he needs to use in order to get power. The interesting thing about too in this play is that it lasts a long time. Like he's king for a long time. It's not a short period of time. You'd think with somebody who's supposedly a weak king, but he's been around for a long time. So his efforts of what he does are very effective. So he knows how to play one person against another. He knows how to get whatever he wants just by using his power, which is kind of like today. So.
Yeah. Graham, that commodity speech is and it surprises us at the end, right? I mean, because he seems to be the bastard's putting down the influence of money in the world, and yet he says, sign me up.
Yeah, I mean, it's the beauty of Shakespeare and the malleability of language. I think of that word so often now, and in our current time more than any history play, and I've spent some time in those histories. I think of King John, and I think of that word commodity because it's been used so many ways. I think I read that Karl Marx used it in a certain way in a speech, and it's a malleable term. It can mean currency. It can also mean expediency. It can mean different things in a bad and good connotation. But boy, oh boy, it's a great word for what we watch happening on our news right now. There's a lot of commodity negotiation happening.
Arthur, the nephew, has a name that you think of the sword and the stone, right? You think of Britons, and he's Arthur of Brittany, Duke of Brittany, when John calls him Arthur of Britain, which sounds like he's not going to live very long. And sure enough, Tommy, you have a discussion and you ask one of the men around you to do something to Arthur. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, he basically, he wants him out of the way. He wants him dead. So he's trying to find a way to make that happen without actually saying the words. So he's trying to put it into Hubert, who he's talking to. He's trying to make Hubert understand what it is that he's looking for him to do, and Hubert does do that. I played that scene on both sides because I played Hubert and I played King John too. So it's a pretty fascinating scene. So so it's about he basically is saying, what if this happens, what would you do? And so before Hubert knows that he's agreed to do something that he doesn't really want to do, so that when he does go to do it, well, that's a spoiler, I guess. I shouldn't say that.
But that is so interesting, Tommy. You're right. You got to play both these men, both these parts. The idea of a leader asking their followers to do something which is illegal, which they daren't put into words.
Right.
How does John get Hubert in a position where he needs to do that terrible thing?
Basically, he asks him to believe in him, in the king, and makes him understand what it is he's looking for, so that what Hubert voices or vocalizes what he's looking for, then John takes it as an agreement to do the thing. So Hubert's almost said he's going to do it without actually saying he's going to do it. So he says death, and then he goes enough, and that's it. So it's understood, and then he moves away, and before he knows it, Hubert's committed to something that he hadn't really intended to commit to.
There's an amazing moment in this play, beautifully played by Tom and Wayne Best, where Shakespeare's language and rhythms play right into that. There's this stichomedia that goes quickly back and forth, which, played beautifully as they did, shows how people can be just talked into something with quick back and forth. It's an amazing testament to Shakespeare's rhythm that's inherent in this play too.
And it's chilling, isn't it? Because before you know it, the death of a person has been contracted and agreed to, and the door is closed, seemingly. Now, I know it's spoiler alert, but Hubert eventually does not do the thing he's been asked to do. He does not follow the illegal order that is given to him by the leader. And then he goes back and he finds that King John is incensed that he thinks he followed the illegal order. He thinks he did the bad thing. And now the monarch is irate at the person he contracted the killing with.
Right. It's interesting in playing it too with that kind of take of the sociopathic thing. It was easier to play that as if John really was upset about this. He basically said, I didn't ask you to do this. I didn't do it. So it was easier to play from true believability as opposed to, what do you mean? What do you mean? And hiding it all up. So he actually, you could get the sense that this guy's kind of crazy. So almost with Hubert goes, is that what he really asked me to do? I don't know if that's what he asked me to do then. So it doubts Hubert whether Hubert made the wrong decision. So it makes it quite complicated and fascinating to play.
Pandolf, the cardinal, also is a force in this. He represents the Pope, and he feels more like the devil than anybody else in this world. As a matter of fact, he knows that King John may want to kill his nephew, and therefore even spurs on the French to invade England, knowing that it will provoke an attempt on that young boy's life. Both of you are very anti-continental powers in this play. What did that feel like? I mean, the pushing back on the Pope and pushing back on the French as the play goes on.
And the bastard learns his way through this, step by step and scene by scene. He's learning and understanding, and certainly he makes comments on watching, the negotiations and the fraying of England and the church. The bastard is sent in the middle of the play or the back half to go and raid the monasteries for money for John's coffers, and he's very conflicted about that. It's when he begins to question what in fact he's doing in action and in deed, and so it's as I say, it's part of that incredible journey for Philip to understand what it means. He's such an open heart and a believer, and he's a man of action, and he believes so strongly in John and follows it through. But he certainly, when it comes to the church and its actions, has questions it throughout, for sure.
It's funny that when you're talking about that, Graham, you realize that in a way the bastard has found his family. He's found his half brother. He's found where he belongs, and he gives up everything, including giving up all the money in the land. Like, he really puts all aside to become a military man and to join his family. So what's the process of growing up that he does as the play goes on? Like, what you were just talking a bit about that learning process. Can you talk to us a bit about what you discovered as you were rehearsing it?
Well, I mean, one of the things that Warren's talking about in this production was Tim's, emphasis and focus. This is I think I have this right, one of the two plays in the canon that's entirely in verse, right? So we very much leaned into the language in this play to drive the production, and extraordinary things came out of that. It's not always the case where we do a play that's fully in verse, where we can immerse ourselves in the rhythm of that play. And when you do that, things come out that Shakespeare embedded in his writing about how the characters are to feel and respond. So, I mean, that's my journey with this play, and my recollections and fond memories are about really digging in as a company to that language. And Tom and I had an amazing scene I still remember and love that in the back end of that play, where Tim allowed us to simply, I could enter from anywhere, anything could happen in that scene. And when you're allowed to swim in a pool like that with a great actor like Tom, it becomes very exciting and immediate. So I know that's not quite an answer to your question, but my experience with the play and the evolution of this man was to do with the immediacy and liveness of the language. It truly was different every night, and we captured it on film on one night, but it varied constantly. I would simply say that he grows up in a massive way from a young man who's quite cheeky and cocky about his brother and land to a leader of England by the end. You've got a speech not unlike sort of Richmond's at the end of Richard III. You've got a very English rah-rah speech. Now, of course, Shakespeare was doing this because Elizabeth was on the throne, and there's so many parallels in this play to her own questions of legitimacy and her father and everything else. But it's almost, Anthony, I would say, being inside this character is what it must feel like to be inside Falstaff, and that is, at times, the character's not so much embedded in the play. He stands outside as this sort of fictional representation of larger things. That's what the Bastard felt like at times.
And Tom, thank you, Graham. That was terrific. And Tom, King John, as you were talking about the sociopath, very clever man, knows how to manipulate. But fear, the word fear comes up so much in this play. And you also, can't help but imagine that King John is just in a fever dream. He's an insecure man who, is worried about his claim. What was that like living that part during the course of rehearsals and the run?
Yeah, he's a very fearful man, which governs everything that he does. He does it because he's afraid he's going to lose becoming a king. He's going to lose his mother. He's going to lose anything. He's going to lose his own life. It's, I guess part of it is it's fun to do. It's fun to do that kind of stuff. I love playing those kind of strange characters because it makes them unpredictable. You can do whatever it is you want to do, and particularly Tim's, what he encouraged us to do was that unpredictable nature. So in terms of doing the verse, Tim's very big on doing the verse line, stopping at the end of a verse line. So with John, I could stop at the end of a verse line and just not say anything for a long, long time because I'd be in the middle of a sentence and people go, well, what's he going to say next? And you wouldn't know. And some nights I'd take a long time. Sometimes I wouldn't take a long time. So that is great fun to do. And so when people who have a lot of fear in them, they like to create fear in other people as well too. So it was fun to actually try and create that. I mean, the scene that Graham was talking about, which was a fantastic scene to play. There was a point where basically John just wants to get off the stage, and Graham stops me, but I didn't know how he was going to stop me every night. So I know some nights I go, my God, I'm going to get off the stage, and all of a sudden, boom! He put his boot on my cape, and I couldn't get anywhere. So, but it was it's great fun to be able to play that kind of insecure. And the other one about playing that kind of fear and insecurity, you want to make him weak, but you don't want to make him so weak that nobody really cares about what happens to him too. So if you watch his brain working, how he's going to get out of this insecurity, it's fascinating to watch that.
Yeah, and the loyalty, the love that the Bastard has for him never kind of, even in the darkest hours, he's there trying to support John.
Yeah.
I remember doing this with Stephen years ago, and I kept thinking about King John as kind of a Richard Nixon character. His insecurities have him do something he didn't have to do to retain power. Like, he didn't have to try to kill that boy in order to maintain power, and yet he does. It's like Shakespeare's tricking people through the circumstances and what's said, prophecies, into doing things that ultimately aren't good for anyone. In light of the discussion about insecure leaders and stuff, and just the heart of this play, what do you think it means to us today? Like, what does this early political play, William Shakespeare's, mean in our world today?
It's not a play that's done that often, and it's I see it sort of spoken about in circles as the sort of runt of the litter of the canon. I think it's an extraordinary play, and even I think sometimes it gets that reputation because it's about an early period of history that we sometimes immediately think is dusty. But Shakespeare was piercing, as I say, using that framework to make very large comments about leadership and structures, and as he always did, questioning those things. And I think the biggest lesson in watching King John today is to question what we've taken as givens. There are structures of inheritance, leadership, rules that we all play by, and Shakespeare, in many fronts in this play, asks the audience to say why. And he embodies it in a guy like the Bastard, who literally says why. when the bastard questions commodity, he's asking the audience and the groundlings out there to say, what is this thing? Have you guys ever wondered, been in a back room where a deal gets cut? And so I think the biggest lesson, and certainly what's, as much as we're going through a lot in the world right now, people are questioning what we've always taken as givens and asking to re-examine what that is. And this play, Shakespeare wrote it, and it's about an even earlier history, but that's what it does, I think.
Thank you. Tom, you've played Hubert, you've played King John. On a more personal level, what has the play meant to you, having gone through it and lived through it twice?
They're both very, very special because, as Graham said, it's not a play that's done very often. So you don't have an audience sort of going, oh, I know what's going to happen next. So they don't. So I've had the privilege to be able to be in it twice. I loved playing Hubert. It was one of my favorite things to do. I like playing interesting guys that don't have to speak too much. And so you don't have to learn so many lines. And John's kind of like that too. I mean, it says King John, but like you say, Graham, you're the guy who spoke more than I did. But because they're unique, it's a unique play that people don't know that often, that when people come and have that experience with it and discover it, it's special. So yeah, it's been, both of them have been very special to me.
You've set up this film so well, this 2014 production directed by Tim Carroll. And so Tom McCamus, Graham Abbey, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, let's enjoy their work in King John. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Stratford Festival on Film viewing party for our 2014 production of King John, directed by Tim Carroll. My name is Antoni Cimolino. I'm the Artistic Director of the Stratford Festival, and I'm delighted that you've joined us tonight. King John is a rarely produced play, but it is a gem. And like all of Shakespeare's work, it has much to say about the world we live in today, about personal integrity in leadership, and what its absence can do to the entire state. Now, in addition to this film and the others in our series, we are constantly adding other online content. In our Creative Concepts series, we have the director of this production, Tim Carroll, being interviewed by our Director of Literary Services, David Prosser. And you won't want to miss that discussion. Tim is a fascinating man, and this is a beautiful production. Meanwhile, in our newest installment of our In Conversation series, I will be speaking to the brilliant writer from The New Yorker, Adam Gopnik, about King John and its relation to the world we live in today. And a week from tonight, please join us for our next viewing party, in which we'll be presenting the 2015 production of Pericles, directed by Scott Wentworth. A beautiful production you will not want to miss. And let me remind you that our 2019 production of The Merry Wives of Windsor is available right now on the Cineplex store. We all need a good laugh right now, and Shakespeare in The Merry Wives delivers. But back to tonight. As you're watching the production tonight and you experience any problems with the streaming, please refresh your screen or go back to adjusting the resolution. If you have further questions, we do have a frequently asked questions section on our homepage, stratfordfestival.ca, that will be able to answer your questions. And now, join me as we take a step back in time to 2014, to the old Tom Patterson Theatre and this beautiful production of William Shakespeare's King John.